Chinese. Family is the closest relationship. Then you have really close groups. People that you know for a long time, people that you trust. This would be equivalent to sororities or fraternities. Then there's Souran, which is more like acquaintances. So after this lecture, we're all going to be this second level of Guanxi. I don't really know you, I don't really trust you, but because of the context and how we met, I have Dr. McIntyre as a reference. So you know my credentials that we're also, we're going to be alumni together sometime. So we have some type of relationship. What can you get from that relationship? What can you ask me and not be asking too much? And also give me enough face to where I don't have to turn you down on losing things. These are things you got to think about. And Senran is basically outsiders. So the key point to understand is this is where every relationship in China starts. Okay, you start off as no relationship. And Chinese have this general, you hate to stereotype, but they always have this general xenophobia about Westerners. Because throughout the history of China, they've always been invaded and occupied by other countries. Whether it's, they've been divided up. You know, it was only recently that China received Hong Kong back from the British. Right? They've been occupied by Japanese. So there's a lot of xenophobia. And they will never say it out loud or even make you aware of it, but you have to keep in mind that in the back of their minds, especially the older generation Chinese, people like 40 and above, this is in the back of their mind. It always starts with a position of distrust. So your goal is to actually try to earn that trust over time to make your business venture and your personal experience there more fruitful. Okay. So you can see how, when you look at the framework at the end, you'll see how everything ties together. Okay, now we get into trust and building goodwill. Okay, so, I mean, a lot of these things aren't even Chinese things. But why do we only talk about them in a Chinese context? I don't know. It's strange. I think the this relationship begins on trust. Now, in Western project management, you know, people have to meet deliverables because this is what the Six Sigma management principle says you have to do. And then you're all tracked on a schedule, and this is when you have to do that. So there's a degree of certainty that people have to perform to a certain level because they're part of the system. Okay? So any of you project managers, you know that you can expect people that you don't even know, who are halfway across the world, to meet their deliverables because they're on the core team meeting. They know what their deliverables are for the next week and whatever. Well, when you work with Chinese, you can't expect that because you're not working in the same system. Okay? Your joint venture partners or your customers or your distributors and channel partners, they're not part of this project management system where if they don't meet your expectations, they're going to get a demerit and somebody's going to come down and say, hey, you're not working on the schedule that you're supposed to. So how do you get people to behave in a way that's conducive to the business and objectives that you're trying to accomplish? Well, first thing to do is develop trust. Because when somebody trusts you, then they trust your judgment, they trust your suggestions, and they will be more sincere in trying to help you succeed. So win-win thinking is another thing that's important because you have to always think that Chinese operate very differently because they're part of a communist system where everybody had the iron rice bowl and there was no capitalism until 20 years ago. So everybody's thinking that, well, I only need to do the minimum to get by, and that's all I need to do. Because there are no rich people traditionally in China. There's a lot of rich people now. But throughout 99.9% of Chinese history, there were really, except for kings, there's no rich people. So whereas we're all motivated by capital gains and success being defined as how much money we can make, what we can accumulate, the Chinese people didn't really think like that. They all think that, well, I work in a factory. Now, I deal with a lot of Motorola people in China. Motorola has a big design center in Shanghai. And I'm pretty good friends with one of the engineering managers. And You know, he was talking about, you know, when he first graduated from university and he was trying to get his wife to marry him. You know, a lot of things that they talk about, whether you can get married, is very traditional. Okay? What's his education? How much money does he make? Well, guess what? When he graduated from college like 20 years ago, everybody that graduated from college and went to work, everybody got the same pay. Isn't that strange? So you finish your Global Executive MBA or Executive MBA, you graduate, and you're trying to find a spouse because you're single. And the in-laws want to know how much money you make. Well, that question wouldn't come up in traditional Chinese culture even 20 years ago. Because depending on where you graduated and what degree you got, your salary's the same. Everybody got paid the same thing. So think about that. What does that mean to somebody that I'm negotiating with who's 45 years old and one of the managers that I'm dealing with? He comes from an environment where when he graduated, everybody that graduated with him got paid the same. So what motivates him to do more? Think about that. Right? We all talk about motivation. We all want to succeed. We all want to look good in front of our bosses. We all want to get promoted. Well, in China, prior to 10 or 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a promotion. You basically put your time in. After 15 years, you got bumped into the next level, no matter what your performance was. So that's the background. Put that into context when you're talking with people who are 45 and above. And that's the setting and environment in which they came from. So David Chang is the former CEO of Philips China. And I had the fortune of actually having a one-on-one interview with David Chang. Because I know him through other connections, personal connections. So I was in China and I went into his office and we sat in this conference room. And this was like when I first started going to China. And he said, Gene, you're in for a real adventure coming to China. And there's one piece of advice that I want to give you. Because when you're managing anything in China, whether it's joint ventures, whether it's customers, whether it's sales, or whatever, what you have to do is you have to understand that nothing in China is black and white. So the really successful manager in China is someone who can manage the different shades of gray. And I thought that was a really poignant statement. I think he actually posted that in the book, China CEO. If you're interested, that's a good read also. But that's something that I always kept in the back of my mind. Nothing is black and white. You have to think of everything as different shades of gray. And only by being able to manage the different shades of gray can you avoid frustration. For all practical purposes, you want to avoid being frustrated because you can't seem to get what you want out of the people that you're dealing with. So the last thing in this Guanxi engine is values. So this slide is very important. I copied this from someplace, inside Chinese business. So this table right here is probably the best summary of why. Often when I go to China, I think China is not just foreign, it's alien. You ever watch Star Trek? And they meet these aliens from another country, and if you violate some cultural thing, they're going to get offended. Well, even China like that. So in the Western context, things that we focus on is we focus on content, we focus on the specifics, and we focus on the end objective. That's really important when we're trying to define our goals and the criteria for success. What are the key success factors of doing something? Now, Chinese don't think like that. They think about the process and the means and the generality of how we work with it. So you take those two dichotomies and try to make them match. It's impossible. Right? I'm trying to talk about key success factors, and you're thinking about the process and how we work together. But this is the reality. You may not hear it directly because you're speaking to the translator or something like that.